Hey everyone, welcome to the Free Assange Vigil. My name is Steve Poikinen. This is week 79, I think. 79 weeks in a row of these. Um, I am joined by all of my co-hosts this morning, and that is rare and wonderful. Andrew Smith, Kendra Christian, Misty Winston are with me. Our guest this morning is Rebecca Vincent with Reporters Without Borders. This is going to be a fantastic conversation. But before we do that, let's run through our numbers as they stand on January 9th, 2021. Today marks 3,682 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. 637 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the United Kingdom for a $4.2 billion IMF loan. It's been 3 days since District Judge Vanessa Baratzer, concierge to the U.S. State Department's denying bail for Julian Assange after refusing to extradite him. And we're going to unpack just how ridiculous that is. Today marks 1,306 days of federal incarceration for a reality winner. But on the more positive side, rapidly approaching 300 days of freedom is Chelsea Manning, who's streaming on Twitch at least 4 days a week. And Jeremy Hammond was released from prison and into a halfway house 52 days ago. Really hope that he can get out of the halfway house soon, but very glad that he is no longer a guest of the state of Oklahoma. With that, how's everybody doing? I'm out of it.
Right?
I'm here.
I'm glad to be back in the world of like the living, as I kind of refer to it.
I'm really not. I'm really not.
It's boring.
Really not.
Normies are boring.
Well, it's as fun as you make it, I guess.
True.
But we have with us today the wonderful Rebecca Vincent, who had the opportunity, I don't want to call it the pleasure, but was in court for the time where the extradition verdict or the no extradition verdict was read out, and was outside of court for most of the time during the bail hearing until the very end. So I wanted to start off by giving you a chance, Rebecca, to kind of give your experience and interpretations of the court proceedings as a whole and everything that was going on outside before we dig into the case itself.
Sure. And I was trying to remember when was the last time I spoke to you guys. I think it was just before the September proceedings. Okay, so we had talked about the difficulty in accessing the February week, right? The at Woolwich Crown Court. Of course, that was difficult, but it was before COVID restrictions were in the mix. So then in September, it became way more difficult because there were so few spaces being opened in the public gallery that everything that we had to do for February to get in was just that much worse for September. And of course, that went on for 4 weeks. So we've gotten quite used to having to fight every day, negotiate, etc., to get in. But Monday was, this was a culmination. So we knew it would be extremely difficult. On Monday, London was in what was called Tier 4, which was not quite a full lockdown, but there were significant restrictions and police were out in full force. Now, I was well within my rights because I was out for work purposes. This is my job. I monitored trials not just in the UK, lots of countries of concern. And often as a campaigner, I'm not sitting at my desk, like many jobs might be. I'm out doing things, monitoring things and speaking to media and things. So this is like part of my normal job for sure. We knew it would be difficult though. So we got there very early. A couple of people with us got there about 4. I was there by about 4:30. It's very cold. So it was, and the sun didn't come up until like after 8 a.m. So, hours of early morning winter temperatures were already hard enough. About an hour into it, police started circling like quite a lot. So we started to have some conversations and they started relatively politely, but they certainly were interested in what we were doing. And we had to talk through who we were, why we were there. And then when more activists turned up, as you know, anytime there's anything in court related to this case, there's a group of activists that will turn up and show support and protest or, organize. They've been organizing for 10 years, right? Like you guys as well. Like there's lots of people around anything that happens in this case. So more of a crowd started to turn up. The police didn't like that at all. They started questioning everybody more aggressively. And I guess under Tier 4, protest was not allowed. So anybody that they viewed as protesting was told to go home or face arrest. I didn't witness any arrests. I think I saw 1 or 2 fines being issued. But basically I couldn't leave my spot because I was then first in the queue for the public gallery. We had no idea how many of us they would let in. If I moved, I would have lost that spot. So I could only see what was immediately in my field of vision. And police just started getting more and more aggressive. And at one point there was a group of about 6 of them walking together and just stating, the public gallery will be closed, go home or you will face arrest, right? So that was the general sort of announcements, and it wasn't true. And since when do police actually have any say in who gets into a court? That's the court's decision, right? And in this case, it's the judge's decision, because as we've learned, she decides even very small details about who is in her courtroom and what they're doing there. And I had an email exchange with her actually, because I had once again sought accreditation, as we have this whole time, which she denied, but she did state that the public gallery would be open. So I had to show that email exchange to police several times. I had to show them Reporters Without Borders press releases, like all sorts of ridiculous steps to justify my presence. And I have some videos recorded of some of it. Some of the activists had the presence of mind to start recording these conversations. So I mentioned that because I think we are going to file a complaint because it was quite excessive. And had we listened to police, I would have gone home. We didn't. We did get into the court. So what I accessed was similar to what we could access in September, the overflow courtroom. I couldn't get into the main courtroom where Julian was. The only person I believe that got into that room was Craig Murray, who's been on the families list, but he's been blogging all along, right? So he got into the main room. He could see Julian. I heard from Craig and some others that actual relatives of Julian's were turned around. They were not allowed into that courtroom, even though they should have been. So Craig was the only one in that public gallery. Then we got into the public gallery in the overflow courtroom. So again, I could see journalists working away and I could see what was going on a television screen. But at least we had the information, because we were, like other NGOs, we were revoked access to the video platform that now exists. So most journalists that were following this had access to that. We did not. So this is a repeated issue with this judge and this court refusing to recognize that NGO observers have a professional role to play here. They don't think that we're any different to the public. So this is why we're left in this position. And then Monday, we saw that police also don't really understand or recognize or respect the role of NGOs. So we have a couple of different issues there. But we finally got in. So the hearing was at 10 a.m. So this was like 5 to 6 hours of drama to even get in there. And proceedings were not that long. I want to say it was only about half an hour. And what the judge read out seemed really, at first, I mean, the bulk of the decision, and everybody has probably read it at this point, right? It's, I think, 132 pages. But as it was unfolding, she didn't read the whole thing. She read a condensed version of it. But it really felt that the decision would be for extradition. Everything substantive was very much against the principles that the reason that most of us are defending the case. She rejected that it was politically motivated. She rejected that it was about journalism. She bought the prosecution's argument almost across the board and dismissed really key aspects of the defense. So I was prepared for the worst. I probably swore audibly at one point in the courtroom because it was just like, it really felt like, okay, this decision is about to be for extradition. And then, of course, she turned to Julian Assange's mental health issues. And I was pleasantly surprised that she did accept the testimony of a number. We in fact, I'm trying to remember back in September, medical testimony was several days, at least 3 or 4 days of like.
It was, yeah, three and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was among the most like detailed,
brutal.
horrific. Yeah, exactly.
It broke me.
Exactly. Yeah. And any of us can imagine what it would be like to have our innermost thoughts, our innermost issues exposed to the world in that way. I can't even imagine. But at least this judge accepted it. So the way that she categorized it in the judgment, we agree with. The word that we keep using, and it's the most accurate, relieved. I was relieved that the decision was against extradition, and we do share that assessment that his mental health is a serious risk. So we have before called it, and I still consider it such, that if he were extradited to the US to face prosecution and detention there, that is a possible matter of life or death. So these grounds are valid. But we're so disappointed with the substance of the decision, and not just for what it means for Julian and his case, because it's undermining the public interest nature of what he did. It's undermining any sort of journalistic argument. But the precedent that sets is really concerning, because it was clear to me that had he not had these mental health issues, she was ready to extradite. And that means that the door is open for this to happen to others, to journalists, to publishers, to sources. Anyone who publishes leaked information could find themselves in the same situation.
Which is the whole point of this case anyway.
Yes.
What do you think, Rebecca, about Beraitzer bringing forth a brand new charge in, oh, by the way, Julian Assange is guilty of the Official Secrets Act, and we're just going to convict him while I read out this decision, and just sort of sliding that into her decision where it had never come up in the trial? Like,
Okay,
is that, to you, is that her giving Crown prosecution a brand new case to try while he's on remand awaiting appeal? In case the U.S. loses appeal, can they introduce, you broke the Official Secrets Act too, and then try him over that?
No. Okay. So what that means, and I can see how it would come out a bit strange. So it did come up in the hearing in February, though, not in September, because
that's okay.
So February was the week of legal arguments, where both sides presented the basis of their cases. So in extradition cases, one thing that has to be done is a comparison to the equivalent in this country. So any extradition case they would hear, they would say what the equivalent would be in UK law. So that's what it was. So that's not accusing him of anything new. That doesn't indicate that he could have a case opened against him in the UK. It was just saying that if the case was opened against him here, it would have been, so our Official Secrets Act here is the equivalent of the Espionage Act in the US. And the problem is that both laws lack a public interest defense. So anybody in this position couldn't defend themselves under either of these laws. They both need to be reformed. This is a bigger issue that we work on at Reporters Without Borders, is advocating for a public interest defense to be introduced into both laws, because honestly, others could very easily, I mean, not just journalists, publishers, sources. We've seen this applied to whistleblowers, but it crosses another line when it's a publisher, right? And that's what was at stake in this case, and what is still at stake.
The Espionage Act has always and only been a cudgel, a political weapon to abridge speech. That's it. That's all it's there for. It's there to silence anyone who crosses the line. And we're going forward, we're going to start focusing here in the States on like targeted campaigns to repeal or reform. And I'd love to work with you guys on that, by the way. That would be great. But it's so, I don't know, unnerving, I guess, that going in the future, any journalist and any publisher is still, as of right now, liable for 17 charges under the Espionage Act, as long as you can't prove that they might hurt themselves. Like, and that's just where this was left hanging. If you can grab a journalist or a publisher or a whistleblower quick enough and prosecute them fast enough, then you don't have to worry about a mental health defense. And that's dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, the fact that he's not American, that he had no significant ties to the US as well, that's even more alarming. So anybody of any nationality, of any residency, could get caught up. And we know now that the UK can't be considered a safe haven for anybody who might anger the US government.
And I actually wanted to ask you too, what do you think about the fact that she, ruled no extradition, but now she's denying bail? Because that seems, she just said that, his mental health is in a precarious state and he is a suicide risk. And yes, it's because the United States prison system is so brutal that he's not being extradited. But the reason he's in such a precarious mental health state is because of the 10 years of psychological torture, and especially the past year and a half, 2 years in Belmarsh. And now she's denying him bail and keeping him in Belmarsh, where that's what's causing his mental health issues. What do you make of that? It seems like a really kind of hypocritical stance. It seems very backwards to me.
Well, so we've categorized as this, and I would continue to say this: unnecessarily cruel and disproportionately punitive. The latest, in fact, in a long line of disproportionately punitive measures against him. Absolutely. We said before the hearing on Wednesday that if this was grounds to prevent extradition, which it is, then it should also be grounds for his immediate release. She said that, and so on Wednesday, I only got in for the very end, so I heard the decision being read, not the argument before that. But she said that his mental health was being managed at Belmarsh. However, on Monday, in the part of her ruling that she read on this, she stated that these issues have been present throughout his time at Belmarsh, despite the support that existed there. For example, frequent calls with his family, etc. So she acknowledged on Monday that these had been active issues throughout that period of incarceration, and then on Wednesday said it's being managed. She was also very dismissive of the physical health risk. So we need to remember as well, COVID infections have been really sharply on the rise, not just in Belmarsh prison, but on his prison block. So that means for several weeks now, he's been nearly continuously confined to his cell. This is de facto solitary confinement. And he's got respiratory issues, of course, as well, which leave him at greater risk. So he's got physical health risks, mental health risks, and not to mention the point of principle that we don't believe he should be detained a moment longer. He shouldn't have been detained in the first place, right? So there's all of these things. But yeah, that was quite a disappointment after Monday, when we had been prepared for the absolute worst, and there was some relief in that decision. Wednesday was a real blow, and really showed that we have a long way to go still in this case.
It's maddening, because during witness testimony, the prosecution's argument was, because Belmarsh is such a shithole, it's beneficial to Julian Assange to extradite him to the US, where American prisons are veritable country clubs with arts and crafts and color televisions and a reading room and things like that. Was their argument during witness testimony. The conditions in Belmarsh are just awful. Nobody would want to be there. So we need to get him over to where he'll be more comfortable, and then to have Baratzer turn around like that and go, well, actually, U.S. prisons are shitholes and Belmarsh is a veritable paradise compared. So we need to keep him here. The inconsistency on behalf of the DOJ throughout, not just with, the, I don't know, sort of schizophrenic logic in the decision and then in the denial of bail. Anywhere else, if this wasn't a show trial, if this wasn't a charade, if it wasn't just a complete mockery of everything that these systems purport to be, there would be an international outcry over this, and to an extent there is, but it's being drowned out so immediately, not just by COVID, but which is the only thing that's allowed in the news. But now, at least here, I don't know if you heard, but we have multiple coups going on inside of our country because people broke into a building.
So I wanted to run through really quick. Richard Medhurst put out a great string of tweets, specifically outlining why Vanessa Baratzer what she cited in denying Julian bail. And I'm just going to read them verbatim. I have dyslexia, so I apologize if I fumble through some words. Judge Baratzer gave the following reasons in denying Julian Assange bail. She started out by going through a timeline of events from 2010 and onward about him being given bail and then seeking asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy. Judge Baratzer said, on Monday, I ruled in Assange's favor. As a matter of fairness, the United States must be allowed to challenge my decision. Assange has already demonstrated that he is willing to flout the order of this court. The stringent conditions imposed on him do nothing to oppose this. Those who put large amounts of money to guarantee his return to the court ended up losing all of their money. The conditions in this prison bear no comparison to the conditions if extradited to the United States. Assange has a huge support network available to him should he wish to go underground. She refers to aiding Snowden. She accepts the latest COVID figures in Belmarsh prison provided by the prosecution, that only 3 tested positive. She deems Belmarsh has managed COVID properly. And in this, she actually denies the fact that there's 40-something COVID positive staff or 30-something COVID positive staff. But in light of this, Judge Vanessa Baratzer denies Julian Assange's request for bail. He is taken out of the dock, which was a glass box, and will be sent back to Belmarsh prison pending appeal by the United States. Yeah. So, Rebecca, as someone that has such a long history of working on press freedom trials. Have you ever seen in the history of your work a judge cite fairness to a sovereign state, not even a person, for a reason to deny bail? Because to me, that's the most disturbing. She's literally saying, I don't want to hurt the United States' feelings, so I'm going to keep Julian Assange in prison. Have you ever heard in any of your work something similar to that?
No, and in fact, I can't compare this case to any other that I've ever worked on. I was just thinking, actually, usually the default is for other solutions apart from detention until the last possible moment. So, for example, I'm working at the moment on Maria Resa's case in the Philippines. She faces at least 8 different charges, and she has 1 conviction. In fact, she was convicted of cyber libel over the summer. However, she will not be imprisoned until the appeals process is exhausted. And so if it's overturned, she'll be free, but she will be imprisoned at some point. But even there, where the measures are so harsh against her, she is out and she's had to post bail. I've lost track of how many times, at least a dozen times she has to be ready at any point to be, ready to post bail in case they try to detain her again. But even in that case, they're leaving her until the last possible moment, not in detention. And I'm thinking of this in other countries too, or countries where journalists are sentenced, but it's conditional. They're released onto bail straight away. I mean, so for the country of the First Amendment to have been pursuing this case in this way and insisting on this, and then for the UK to be enabling it, it's really shocking. And again, it's the precedent as well that this sets for everything else. And I still struggle to understand why more people don't see that precedent and have not treated it as such. It's as if certain people have just convinced themselves that it won't impact the entire climate that all of us operate in, but it absolutely will. We stated before Monday, and we maintain this too, that it is the future of journalism that is at stake here, not just in the US, the UK, but internationally. So that has to be borne in mind. And just preventing his extradition on mental health grounds does not inspire confidence for the broader issues at stake.
I also wanted to ask you,
I have a question. I'm just wondering if will the defense be able to appeal the bail decision?
Yeah, so what we're waiting on at the moment, unless there's been a development in the last 12 hours or something since I've looked, we're waiting for the legal team to decide if they're going to file that. I believe that it would be in their interest to at least try an appeal, but I believe they get 1 shot, so it has to be done in the right way. I think it would have to be done pretty quickly as well. So that would go to the High Court, because Judge Bradford has now refused bail 3 times. So another judge could interpret this differently. And I have to say, from a more personal perspective, I'm looking forward to just another judge to be dealing with court proceedings. Maybe they would take a different standing on NGO access as well. I believe that was the last thing that this judge will rule on. So yeah, they have a chance. So we're waiting for 2 things in the legal case: is A, will the defense will the defense appeal the rejection of bail? And then B, will the US actually file this appeal? They stated that they will. Somewhat ironically, so the hearing was on the 4th. Somewhat ironically, they had 15 days from that date to actually file the appeal, which takes us to the 19th of January. And of course, on the 20th, it will then be the responsibility of a new administration. But at no point does the Biden administration have to follow through with anything that the Trump administration has done in this case. And some of us are already involved in early advocacy. We would call very much on Biden to just close the books on this case once and for all as a matter of priority when he takes office. I think we're never going to see the U.S. concede on the principal points, but just stop pursuing it. Drop the appeal, close the books, leave this man in peace, and stop abusing the Espionage Act in this way.
Let me ask you, Rebecca. Do you think that Joe Biden, A, is going to be allowed to make a single decision as president, and B, considering the very few statements he's made about Julian Assange include phrases like high-tech terrorist? Do you see the possibility of an arguably more technocratic, more draconian, harsher on free speech Biden-Harris administration dropping this?
I hope so. And we don't know, frankly, what he will do, how his administration will approach this issue or other controversial cases. But we can make the argument that he could break from the legacy of the Trump administration, which did actively pursue these charges. So I think we have to wait and see. As a human rights campaigner, I'm always prepared for the worst, but I always hope for the best and try to work towards a more favorable outcome, because this has always been a political case, and the swiftest solution will be political. So rather than the appeal dragging on, we don't know how long that could take. And the US could lose on other grounds. There's a scenario in which they could file their appeal and try to argue on mental health grounds or US prison conditions, for example. But another court, the High Court, might actually take a stronger position on some of the issues that Baretzer did not. For example, the Espionage Act charges. So there are scenarios where there could be a stronger win for Julian Assange, and so that's a risk that the U.S. government takes if it continues to pursue this case.
Can you briefly explain what the High Court looks like to the people who are watching right now? Because I think it's more than likely that we have a predominantly American audience, and like we've had to take a crash course in English law. And we've had to take a crash course in like extradition law and all that kind of stuff. Alex Hill, who does the wonderful work out of New Zealand with Candles for Assange, put out a tweet like a month or so ago that was like, Assange activists have the equivalent of a PhD, and then it just listed down all of these different things. But could please explain the difference between Magistrates Court, where Julian has been, and the High Court, where he will eventually likely wind up?
Well, just think of it as the next step, the appellate court, essentially. So I'm also not a lawyer, and I'm also American. I've been here over a decade now, but these particular steps are new to me too. So this was in Judge Baretzer's purview, and now it will not. It will be at the next court. So I understand that it will be heard at the Royal Courts of Justice, which you guys might have seen in other trials. It's sort of the one that's always in films, or sometimes you see celebrity cases. I don't know, recently the Johnny Depp libel case or something. It's that court that this will go to. So we don't know yet what judge will be responsible for this, but this is the chance for appeal in this country.
I have another question around that. So I don't know if you saw what Stefania Marizzi had recently got with her FOIA request, showing that they had planned to basically, if it went through, extradite Assange before allowing him to appeal to the European Human Rights Court. So I'm wondering, after this court that we're at right now, is there like another level of appeal within the UK, or would it go straightly to the European Human Rights?
So there's a few different things going on with that. I think Stefania has waded into a bigger issue that we're having in this country with problems with freedom of information. This government, in recent months in particular, has taken a really heavy hand, and there's others. So this has manifested in this case a few times. I'm thinking as well of declassified has been barred access to certain information in this case, but this is a broader issue. So Stefania has fought it, and that was really valuable. But I think the substance of that negotiation, it's indicative of another prevalent attitude with this government, which, of course, we've just left the EU. So there was a strong sort of campaign for that over years, and it finally took effect on the 1st of January. But many of the people behind that are in power now also are skeptical of other European institutions. So there is a movement that could see us actually trying to leave the Council of Europe or the European Convention on Human Rights. The argument at the moment, and it's gone a bit quiet because there's so many other pressing things like COVID, but the argument first and foremost was to abolish the Human Rights Act, which is the law here that it takes the European Convention on Human Rights into domestic law here. So there's already this element here that wants to abolish that, and it so far hasn't been connected to like exiting the entire convention, but it could. So I think that discussions about trying to make sure that anybody doesn't have their access to those provisions, it's that same sort of attitude that there's somehow like British sovereignty and that we shouldn't be reporting in any way, shape, or form to European institutions, right? That's not necessarily the dominant attitude, and it would take them a long time to actually extricate the UK from all of those processes. But I think it's that sort of attitude that's underpinning that. So it's really good that Stefania got access to that, and I think she's been doing some other investigative work as well. So hopefully more is coming. But I was appalled to see that the negotiations from the start were aimed at ensuring that he didn't have full human rights protections that we're all entitled to.
So if there's not a political solution, I've had a lot of people asking me this, how long approximately is the appeals process? For people who don't understand, the British court system or how that all works, in the United States, appeals can take forever, years, it can go on for years and years. Is it the same? Is it something that is, a very quick moving process? I know that there was some rumors flying around about potentially it could be as soon as May. Like, people have just been asking me, so when does this all happen? Everybody's very antsy about what's next.
So again, nothing is normal about this case. So I'm afraid it's difficult to make an accurate prediction, because normally appeals could take years. In fact, I've heard in other extradition cases it could take 3 years, 4 years, maybe 5. But I've also, from those with greater knowledge of the extradition legal case itself, I've heard that it's quite likely that this will be expedited. And I've heard that May rumor as well. So let's see. That rumor stemmed from somebody believed that a court had been booked already for May, but I haven't seen anything to confirm that. So we have to just wait and see. But I think given the political motivations here, it's probably in their interest to do it quickly if they're going to do it. But even quicker would be to just close the books on this case and let him free. Yeah.
Yes. And you actually spoke briefly about how different it is from maybe other countries, how Julian is being treated. And I know I've heard you spoke about this in interviews before, but can you, for our audience, talk about how different this case was for you and the difficulties in trying to get access to monitoring this case? Because I know I've heard you talk about how this is extraordinarily awful.
Oh, yes. This has been the most difficult case to monitor of any in my career. And I'm not exaggerating. Not just me, other colleagues at RSF that have been involved in certain aspects of this. We're not accustomed to this. And it's not just a matter of COVID-19 restrictions. I do understand that there has to be restrictions on numbers, but there's other workarounds that if open justice was the interest here, they would find other ways of accommodating us. First and foremost, just give everybody access to the cloud video platform. The technology exists, So February, we had the situation where we had to queue outside Woolwich Crown Court. There were at the time 20 spots in that public gallery. I think 6 were held for the family. That meant on any given day, there were 14 for the general public, which included all of the NGOs that this judge refused to accredit. But that was doable. I had to be out there by about 5:30 each morning. And again, that was February, so it was winter weather, but you could get your way in. But fast forward to September, and in practice, that meant there were 5 spots, but not only 5. I mean, so anybody who follows me on Twitter knows about my various rants on this. So one of them is about these mysterious VIPs. Yeah. So there were, if you can imagine, how many people are interested in attending this hearing, and there were 5 spots. But yet, and the judge constantly states in writing, the court reinforces this in writing, that the public gallery is to be accessed on a first come, first served basis. So they won't allocate us seats in it because that would violate this first come, first served principle. But they withheld seats for these 3 unnamed VIPs. Nobody knew who they were. It took me nearly 3 weeks to get information that they were in fact diplomatic passport holders. And I found out that one of them was being saved for the Australian High Commission here. Now, they actually had a seat in the main courtroom. The Australian, so there's lots of rumors around this as well, that I think there were misunderstandings in Twitter. He was there. I wasn't in the main courtroom, so I can't see how often he was there, but I know he regularly attended. He had a spot in the main courtroom. They didn't know that there were any seats being held for them in the public gallery of the overflow room. And I don't think other diplomats realized that either. And they certainly didn't know that it was being used to bar access to the public and to NGOs. So they intervened when they found out, and then the judge released those seats to the public. But that meant for nearly 3 weeks of proceedings that there were 2 spots for the first hour and a half. And then they'd finally, when these VIPs didn't turn up, they never turned up because they didn't know they had a seat. Finally, after an hour and a half in the morning, they'd let 3 more people in. But like, you would miss really substantive portions of the argument. In the afternoon, it was half an hour, so it wasn't as soul destroying. But if you can imagine, if you're either queuing or had somebody queuing for you since about 5 a.m. and then to be held an extra hour and a half for people who didn't even know they had the seats. And then I tried to argue with the judge that showed that, like, it was in her discretion to allocate seats, but no, not for us, of course. So that was one level of absurdity. There were many others, but I think what it comes down to, some of these things can be explained away. Some of them could be coincidence, some of them could be incompetence. I mean, we can never overlook that. But there's been so much of that. The cumulative impact has really been, it feels like a deliberate attempt to make it as miserable and as difficult to follow these proceedings as possible. And I think that has to be deliberate. There is too much of this. It's been too consistent, and it's constantly shifting goalposts. It's been at 3 different courts. So this year we've had proceedings at Woolwich Crown Court, the Old Bailey, and Westminster Magistrates Court. The key thing here is this judge and this case. And so why is it so difficult? What do they have to hide? Honestly, if in her position, and I don't want to speculate too much until the appeal is exhausted, but we've been critical of certain positions here. I think in her position, I would certainly want there to be as much transparency as possible, because this is historical. This will be scrutinized. This will be appealed. I frankly understand many of her decisions.
I don't. It only gets scrutinized if it goes our way. If it doesn't go our way, there's no way to scrutinize it because the press dies. You know, I mean, we can talk about it in a void, but I mean, right now there's a massive social media purge going on. I don't know if you've checked your follower count lately, Rebecca. Mine went down by like 1,000 and then back up around 900. Now that after yesterday's mayhem, I'm like averaged out down to about like down 150 from yesterday.
Max Blumenthal said he's down 5,000 followers in one day.
Yeah. I mean, and unless we have an outlet to where we can express, you know, skepticism and break this down and deliver that analysis to the public at large, it just stays in our head. You know what I mean?
Well, that's one reason that we've really tried to systematically monitor and document it as professionals, right? As press freedom professionals. I will say there are some elements of the international media that seem to have woken up to this case this week. It's still not enough, but it was a lot more. I did constant interviews for about 3 days. I'm still doing a few. And many of these are outlets that had never been interested in this case before, or at least not in recent history, maybe 10 years ago. But like, I want to encourage those people along because now they are accepting of some principles of the case. I think it's interesting to me that the decision against extradition triggered that interest, even though the decision did not verify the arguments we're making. The international media does now seem to be aware of and concerned about that precedent as well. So this week has felt different to every week prior. I've tweeted a few, you know, I do rant about this sometimes too, because I really believe we would have been looking at a different situation long ago had there been more unity and solidarity a long time ago. But more people are on side now. So we need that. We need mainstream voices too. We need the media. We need more human rights and free expression organizations speaking out. So I would encourage people to, I know everybody's exhausted, especially those who have been involved in this from the very beginning, but keep taking the time to explain it to those who will listen. We can't always do this on a wide scale, but I find when I have individual conversations with people that are skeptical, it almost always changes minds because people, and in my world, that's journalists, that's NGOs, that's policymakers. These are people who think they know the case, they believe certain things, and usually aren't aware that these are misperceptions. And so, you know, we need as many people as possible who care about the case to keep having those conversations and to be open to others changing their mind. That's still what we need here. And that takes strength of character to change one's mind. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. But it's sometimes hard to see it as such, right?
Do you just, I mean, because we've done this where we've just put that interview that Melzer gave where he broke down everything, like we've just put that in people's hands. Like, here you go, you know, because it seems like when the professional class has an opinion on this, it is almost always a talking point that was handed to them from their outlet of choice for confirmation bias and has very little to do with reality. And I think that when someone of Melzer's standing gives an interview that powerful with that much detail, with that much primary source documentation, that it becomes impossible to deny reality on the facts. And so you have to then, that person that you're talking to has to wrestle with, okay, do I want to accept that I've made a mistake and learn from it? Or do I want to double down on my position because my work sphere has that same position? Do you know what I mean? Like there's a little battle that has to go on inside somebody at that point.
And I don't think people are necessarily even articulating that that's what's happening. I think it's human nature to, first of all, people get very tribal, and this case is no different, right? So if you're part of some group, whatever that might be, and you feel that it's unpopular to defend Assange, your instinct is going to be towards that, right? It is true that the more expert voices that we have on this, that helps a lot. So his work has been great, not just his interviews, and every interview I've seen him do has been fantastic, but his documentation, these reports that he filed. Do you know what though? The UK government is ignoring them. I mean,
still haven't looked at them as far as I know.
Still, yeah,
well, it's shocking. They've seen them. I know this because I've raised this with certain people in government here, and they have strong opinions about it. I am alarmed that they can be so dismissive of a UN special procedure when it comes to the UK. And he's not the only mandate that we've seen this on, and it's not just on this case. We have a problem as a country here where we don't like when these special procedures are examining domestic issues in the UK. So they're more supportive when it's looking at other, issues abroad, but not here. So that's something that I keep in my advocacy efforts constantly too, because we need to support Niels. But we also, this is why I say we do need the mainstream media too, because there are a lot of people that they are the ones that can change people's minds, and they need to understand this case properly and report fully accurately. And I don't think everything is necessarily as sinister as it can appear. I am an optimist by nature, but I do think definitely the more I have gotten involved in this case, there has certainly been a concerted effort. And I believe that's stemming from the states involved in this case, to be honest with you, to present him in a certain way, to undermine support for him. Specifically, so any sort of support that gets at the nature of this being journalistic. And I think that was the motive behind the new superseding indictment that was filed at the very late stages before the September proceedings, that expanded the scope of the hacking charge. Because if they move away from the Espionage Act charges and focus more heavily on the hacking charge, that is a lot harder for those defending journalism and press freedom to defend, because hacking in and of itself is not journalistic. So that makes it harder to construct that case. And I think we would still look at the motive in targeting him, but it makes it a lot harder to defend. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the US government's focus then became that in the very, very late stages before September. In fact, what we heard in court was that Julian Assange had not even read the new superseding indictment when he appeared in court in September, because it was filed so late, it hadn't even made its way to him in prison, which was unacceptable. But we heard some of that in the judgment on Monday as well too, that real focus on the hacking charge. So I think we need to watch that and watch what happens with that in the appeal as well.
One thing I was going to ask you is, I know that in her ruling, she had said that she couldn't, because the case was open in Spain, on UC Global, that she was basically kind of dismissed that, I guess. But I'm wondering how that works when there was eyewitness testimony in the courtroom. Wouldn't she have been able to rule based off of that?
I would have thought so, because I would have thought that evidence could be admissible in this court as well, because what she referenced is the fact that there hadn't been a decision, that the investigation hadn't concluded there yet, and there hadn't been a decision. I think my view of that is that it was a matter in her discretion, and she has chosen to interpret it in that way. Because some of those, I think some of the same witnesses in that case were on the witness list for this. I'm thinking Stefania Marizzi, for example, because I know she testified in both cases, because her phone was one of the pieces of evidence, I think, right? It had been dismantled in the embassy and tampered with. So yeah, I think there are many points in that could come up again in appeal. And again, the court could actually be more favorable than she has been. So the US could find itself losing on more substantive points if they continue to pursue this.
Yeah, that's what do you make about the lack of support amongst journalists? Because to me, that's been one of the most frustrating things to witness. Like you said earlier, it's very strange that people don't recognize the precedents that this sets and how dangerous this truly is. And you would think that of any group of people, journalists would be the ones, leading the charge and, standing up and speaking out about how this is going to affect their profession and, our a society in a massive way moving forward. And it's been very frustrating, not just from mainstream media reporters, because to some degree you expect that, they're kind of owned and operated by these corporations, and these corporations don't like Julian Assange. And so, I mean, to some degree, I kind of get that. It still is frustrating. But even amongst, alternative media and independent journalism, there's been, there are great people, Kevin Gosztola and Mohammed Almazy and Craig Murray, a lot of wonderful people doing great work, but it feels like, there's been mostly a shying away of support of journalists for Julian. What do you make of that? I ask people this all the time because I'm still trying to figure it out. So maybe you have some insight.
I think that just shows that the strategy to sort of undermine that support has worked. And I think people don't always realize that they are applying a bias. And again, the levels of misperceptions. I've never worked on a case where there were so many common misperceptions about every single layer. This is really one of the most complicated, not only the most divisive, but one of the most complicated cases I've ever worked on. And again, people formed judgments long ago. As a campaigner, that's why this has been hard. Most of the time, in most cases that I'll take up in most countries, my challenge is to tell that story to the world, right? To put it on the agenda. But that wasn't the case here. It was challenging people's decisions that they had already made about this case. At this point, there are very few people who are not aware of Julian Assange and who haven't formed an opinion one way or the other. That opinion might have been the basis of headlines 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago. So, I think it's a product of that. And I hope that it has been a lesson learned. I hope that the decision being at least against extradition has surprised many. I think that resulted in a lot of the interest we've seen this week that has been more than in recent months and years. And I hope that will lead people to think twice, not only about how they pursue this case going forward, because we do need to stick with it until he's out, until the case is closed, until the underlying issues are addressed so that this can't be applied to others. But I hope that the next time there is a Julian Assange, that we see greater unity in the first place, because there will be another case. We don't know exactly what it will look like, but we will see another example of states employing such vast resources to try to target somebody in this way, to make an example of them and to have a chilling effect internationally.
And this is the first, this is a brand new thing, right? A precedent being set to charge somebody under somebody else's, as a journalist under somebody else's espionage laws, correct? I mean, this is new for Reporters Without Borders, right, as well?
Yes, so this would have been this is the first time that a publisher has been pursued under the Espionage Act in the US. We've seen it applied to the leakers themselves before, but not to those who publish leaked information. So that would be alarmingly precedent setting. And this is the only time that I've seen an extradition attempt like this get so close to being effective. I gave an example to a journalist the other day of Can Dündar. He's a Turkish editor. He's been exiled for some time. He's luckily safely in safely in Germany. He would not be safe in Turkey, but Turkey moved forward and charged him in absentia with like terrorism and espionage related crimes based on his publishing about illegal arms smuggling to Syria. And this kind of judgment shows that somebody like John could never be safe in the UK. You could never be certain, like, where is the line drawn? Is it because of the special relationship with the US? Or does this just mean that, the UK is not going to take a stand? If it was Turkey pursuing a case instead of the US, would we be looking at any different outcome? We can't know for sure. So, there are states with much stronger protections like this. Germany is often a place of safe refuge for exiles from many countries, exiled journalists and dissidents. Canada has a much stronger record on these things, but what the UK has shown now is that it can't be considered a safe haven for anybody who, had published information like this and was being sought.
Yeah, which is kind of terrifying, because you would think that, the US and the UK should be, the safe haven for free speech and free press. That's, kind of their whole gig, which is, it's really, really terrifying. And like you said earlier, it's really difficult for me. Like, I get really frustrated because you would think that people would be much more terrified by this. It really is a huge deal. It's really quite a turning point in our history. That, moving forward, this is going to go one of two ways, and it's going to have a massive effect on where we head in the future. Which,
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah.
I think that was partly what was at play in this case too, because there was a much different public opinion of Julian Assange in the US and the UK than in other countries. I found there was much more sympathy in other parts of Europe. And I think that's because people struggled to comprehend what our states were actually doing. Because I think we tend to look at our systems in good faith and think that our democracy is safe, that our checks and balances will work. And I think there was this reluctance to accept that we are witnessing a political persecution by states that are not meant to engage in this behavior. I think too many people were too slow to wake up to that and maybe still haven't accepted it. But that is really dangerous because that's what could allow this to happen again. And so, you know, we tried to do our best in documenting this and mobilizing those, including in the more mainstream media and human rights organizations and other free expression organizations, because we needed the broader public to understand that. I think more people have come around in recent months than before, but in a way it was too little too late, because if there's not public pressure on the states involved, they will get away with a case like this again. And at the moment, I don't feel significant public pressure on either of the governments involved.
No, we've been trying to build it, but it's been a very uphill battle, I would say, for sure. I think everybody here, my co-hosts, would all agree with me that this has been, you know, like a real slog through the trenches. You know, we are seeing some improvements, though, I think, for sure. I mean, we have definitely seen an increase in support, especially, I would say, over the past, I don't know, month or two, particularly over the past couple of weeks with the ruling, you know, being announced and everything. I think a lot of people have maybe just finally started paying attention. Like they're like, oh, okay. And to be fair, I mean, I will give some people a little bit of leeway here because there's a lot going on right now.
Yeah.
So it is hard for people to, you know, who have, you know, 2 jobs and kids and soccer practice and all of those things to pay attention. But to me, this is maybe the single most important issue that we're facing right now. I mean, I understand COVID is a threat and, you know, there are a lot of things going on, but, you know, we say all the time, if whatever issue you're fighting for, whether it's healthcare or you're fighting against the wars or you want, you know, improved education, you can't fight for any of those things if you don't have a free press. So this is, you know, something that is going to influence every other fight that we face. So, I mean, hopefully now we're starting to see some people come to terms with that and realize that. I'm hoping, you know,
I'll say that
going that way.
I'll say that it was incredibly encouraging at our events in front of the UK embassy in DC and at the DOJ when we brought out, you know, cake for everybody for the no extradition verdict. Like a third or more of the people that showed up for it were media.
Yes.
in their own right, like, and you know, independent journalists. We didn't have a single mainstream outlet, you know, come down and cover it, even though multiple press releases had been issued. Trevor Fitzgibbon actually hit up like 210 different outlets in the DC area, just randomly DM'd me, I think, the morning before the hearing, and was like, hey, if you want a hand. I'm like, all right, I'm going kind of crazy, so please, I don't know. And but it was fantastic because most of the people involved in media that showed up ended up speaking too. And we got some great footage of a wonderful Max Blumenthal rant in front of the UK embassy that will stay with me for quite a while.
That's probably one of the most powerful rants that I've seen, to even call it that, because if you haven't seen it yet, Max Blumenthal actually goes into exhausting detail about UC Global's efforts to interrupt Julian's receiving of political asylum from another country. They were literally going to make him a internationally recognized diplomat to be able to get him out of the embassy and I believe out of the country and into, I'm not even sure where, hopefully a non-Five Eyes state. And the CIA, through coordination with UC Global and Sheldon Adelson, had worked to interrupt that while releasing a secret indictment of Julian Assange, but publicly denying it, which interrupted the entire process of international diplomatic immunity. So just that revelation, we have like a 6-minute clip. I may actually try to find it to pull it up here and show you, because somewhere amongst all.
Max has done incredible work on the whole UC Global situation. He does incredible work on most everything that he writes about, but the stuff that he's done on the UC Global situation and the spying, particularly on journalists, which, again, the fact that the journalists who were spied on don't seem to be that upset about it is really confusing to me as well. But Max's work has truly been invaluable. And he's one of the few, kind of independent journalists who has, given consistent coverage to this case, and I'm very, very thankful to him for that, and for showing up to our events. That was amazing.
It was. So, I'm wondering too, Rebecca, how so with Reporters Without Borders, have you seen since the Assange arrest a sharp increase in arrests for journalists? Because I know in the U.S. Actually, was it Freedom of the Press? Org.
It was Reporters Without Borders Press Freedom Tracker that they cited that off of, right?
Oh, was it?
So it's a coalition project. So we're a partner in it. But yeah, it's a U.S. Press Freedom Tracker. I think there's more than a dozen press freedom organizations part of that. So no, luckily we're not facing that kind of a situation in the UK. We did see some violence against journalists covering, because we did have Black Lives Matter protests here too, but the violence against journalists here was from protesters, not from police. And we didn't see any sort of widespread action like we have in the US. But yeah, the situation there was really alarming, and it clearly is not stopping. We were looking at press freedom violations with the recent events at the Capitol too, journalists who were targeted for trying to cover that. So that documentation is still coming out. But the Press Freedom Tracker is a really excellent resource for that kind of thing.
Yes, it is. And that was actually really bizarre to watch, because they were detaining journalists and not the people storming the Capitol building, which was interesting. To see journalists being detained. That's another thing that frustrates me, is that it has gotten so bad in the US over the past, I always say the past 10 or 15 years, it's really been bad. But it's really gotten bad. We're seeing it all the time now. During the Black Lives Matter protests, it wasn't just that they were being detained or arrested. The police were beating journalists.
And shooting. Yes. Rubber bullets and tear gas canisters and macing and
and they're clearly marked as press, or they're yelling, I'm pressed. And there's one video where the cop is looking right at them and she's yelling, I'm pressed, and he shoots her with a rubber bullet anyway. It's terrifying that this is happening in this country.
I don't know how much time you have, Rebecca. I want to ask, while we have you here, and we had a wonderful conversation Monday morning with Jamie, by the way. And thanks again to him. And I believe he was one of the people that was helping you queue in line in September.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. And just to warn you guys, I'll have to hop off in a minute because I've got a live media interview on Al Jazeera on this case. So I'll answer, but then I'll have to leave you guys.
Okay.
Jamie was one of the activist heroes who helped us. So the public stepped in where the court failed to recognize the role that NGO observers would have in these proceedings. And it was kind of happenstance because I hadn't met Jamie. I don't know if he was there in February or he wasn't in the queue situation. So in September, I turned up trying to argue our way in, et cetera, et cetera. And Jamie had been in the queue since 5 a.m. at least. And then and there saw I wasn't going to get in, offered me his spot. And then he regularly helped us after that, a few others as well, too. I want to thank actually Emmy Butlin and Deepa Driver and a few of the other really consistent, persistent activists just for all of the ways they've supported us and keeping me company. I've spent more time with them than many people this weird lockdown year.
Yeah.
So yeah, they faced everything I've documented and complained about. They've faced it 100 times over. So.
Yeah, and Deepa will be on with us next week. We love her very, very much.
We love Deepa.
So when do the US and UK get downgraded below 50 in the Press Freedom Index for all of this crap?
It gets updated every year just before World Press Freedom Day, which is the 3rd of May. So in April sometime there will be an update. But it's a really data-driven process. I think there's always misunderstandings, and people on both sides always think that I'm responsible for the UK's ranking. I'm not. The UK government blames me for it, and the public blames me for it. And no, it's a really in-depth questionnaire. Last year, I think there were 117 questions. It goes to a panel of experts in every country. And I tell you what, in the UK, we have quite robust participation in that survey across a range of sectors. So this case did affect the ranking slipping in the past, and we'll see what happens with the ranking this year. But it's always a matter of also, you just have to understand what's going on in so many other countries too. And this is bad. It's bad. But there's also countries, because I get letters from activists on this a lot. And when I meet people in person, I try to explain the process that goes into it, because I do want people to understand. But you can't just arbitrarily pick a country and put it somewhere else. It's this process, right? And
I get that. At least with the UK now, you've got Julian Assange, Craig Murray, the BBC4 smear piece on Vanessa Beeley, Eva Bartlett, Ambassador Ford, and just a number of other cases that just sort of showcase Western imperialism and a demonization of the press. And I know that that's not unique in, basically what amounts to regimes. I know that. The process fascinates me, and I'd love to learn more about how you allocate rankings. I would. Another time. I know you got to get out of here. Thank you so much for.
The chat loves you, by the way.
What I am responsible for in that process is the analysis that goes out with it, like not like the wording that comes out. So what you see, and I always make sure that this case is highlighted in that. So last year, the main reasons for the UK's poor ranking, because it is poorer than it should be for a country that has an international standard setting role, it was safety of journalists in Northern Ireland and the detention of Julian Assange. Those were the two issues that really plagued our record. So yeah, that will come out in a few months. Would be happy to chat about it. The US is 45th, which is really not good enough either. So yeah, we should all be doing better. So thank you guys. So I'll run to talk to Al Jazeera now, just because it is a mainstream outlet covering the case. So let's go with it. But yeah, thanks a lot for having me again.
Thank you,
Rebecca.
Always an honor.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
Rebecca Vincent from Reporters Without Borders. It's great,
I
man.
love her.
Enjoy those talks.
I'm gonna pull up here because we had talked about it. It's a quick 2-minute video. It should screen share well with audio. Max Blumenthal's speech when we were outside the British Embassy. I only have about 2 minutes of it queued up, but it's literally the exact portion about UC Global.
No one's going to be able to hear it, dude.
They should be able to hear. I can share audio. It should come through just fine.
Let us know in the chat if you can hear it.
Let me...
Sinai Security Services to talk about coming out of the embassy legally under international law. He was going to be given diplomatic immunity. A third-party country was going to make Julian Assange a diplomat. But the CIA was spying on these meetings, and I have proven that it was the CIA that was spying on these meetings, the U.S. government, spying on his legal team, violating attorney-client privilege, and they issued the secret indictment of Julian Assange in Washington when everyone was denying there was an indictment because they knew he was trying to come out of the embassy. At this time, they were tailing his partner, Stella Morris. They were trying to steal his child's diaper out of the dumpster to try to prove that it was his DNA. They were plotting to assassinate him with poison. They were plotting to kidnap him. This was all revealed in this Spanish trial. And ultimately, the plan to give Julian Assange diplomatic immunity under the international law was shattered by the CIA. But this has significant implications for the trial at the Old Bailey in London. Because now that we know through this Spanish case where the CIA contractor, David Morales, and UC Global, which Mike Pompeo was using to spy on Julian Assange, now that we know that the CIA was spying on him and his lawyers, now that we know that the CIA was plotting to assassinate him, that this idea was pitched by David Morales to kill him, now that we know that, there is absolutely no way he can be extradited here and to expect anything even pretending to be a free or fair trial. There is absolutely no way legally that he can be extradited to this country, which has already tortured him for years, which is controlling.
And so Max goes on a little bit longer, but I don't have that rest of that. But that lays out in solid, provable form what that Spanish case has been able to uncover so far. And that's something that Judge Vanessa Baratzer said yeah, I'm not, I'm not talking about that. We're not going to worry about that. Like, that's happening somewhere, but like, totally not my problem, which is complete horseshit.
Very bizarre. That's very bizarre that that's something that they can just pretend doesn't exist in a case as important as this. This is proof. This is whistleblowers coming out and telling that this is what happened. There were cameras in bathrooms and everywhere, and there were recording devices, and they were recording his meetings with his lawyers. Like that alone should be enough. I know we've had it before, but that should be enough to throw this entire case out the window. That is a massive violation of his rights. I mean, you have a right to have private conversations with your attorneys in order to prepare your defense. And when people who are actually prosecuting you are the ones spying on you as you're trying to prepare that defense, that is a huge violation. Like, I can't even wrap my head around how fucked up that is.
Because it's absurd. You can't wrap your head around it. That's why if you manage to, then there goes your head. You know, I mean, it's like, that's why I had asked Rebecca that, because I'm like, that's just such bullshit. Again, that evidence was provided to the judge in the court, and she could have ruled on that. I mean,
that judge isn't a judge.
Yeah.
No.
She has no actual.
What do you call her? The concierge to the State Department, right?
Yeah, but no, I mean, like, even under UK law, right? She can't take testimony from an open court case and include it into her decision-making process. Like, that's a restriction placed on her in the position that she's in as like this district, the whatnot.
What happens if that case is then in Spain is then finished and it's, they rule in Julian's favor in that? Then what happens in the UK? Can they then look at that case?
Then under appeal, it can be brought in, and then the panel of high court judges that acts as Rebecca was explaining, like the appellate court here in the US, it's a panel of judges. There's still no jury. But it's a panel of judges who are like established. They've climbed as high as they can in their careers, so they're not making their bones off of this case. So some of the thinking around it is that they'll be able to introduce UC Global evidence. They'll have to accept it because it's a settled case, and that judges who aren't at the beginning of their career, who are looking to make some bones and get some promotions, will have a little bit broader and longer view of what the law is and rule, on the side of, I don't know, rationality.
Can I ask, maybe maybe you don't. So what happens if, do we know where the UC Global case is, like how close it is to being done? Because I'm wondering if they drag that case out and then they rush the appeals and they rule against Julian and he ends up getting extradited, and then the UC Global case is finished, will that then have any bearing? Will his lawyers be able to appeal based on that? I guess I'm asking a bunch of legal questions that we should really ask a lawyer, but
we should get someone on here, because I do think that, I mean,
I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, but also like with the UC Global case, I mean, you could easily see the UK saying, well, that was a Spanish court that ruled on that.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's kind of the thing where I'm like, if you have the evidence in your own court, you're hearing the evidence. So do you know what I'm saying? I could just see it. I don't know.
No, you're right. They can do that. They can. However, the defense still has the right to call forth all of those people as witnesses and have them testify to everything that they know. And just because you can't include another country's ruling in your decision, you certainly have to allow for that testimony into your court. Right. So the ruling itself may not. The only factor the ruling plays is whether or not you can introduce that evidence into another case and have those judges consider it. You know what I mean? If it's still open, then they can go, oh, well, it's still open. We can't make a ruling on a case that's still open. But when it's settled, we can incorporate evidence in a case that hasn't been decided. Okay? Because the Spanish judge could be like, yeah, no, I'm going to throw this out. So as long as it's ongoing, they'll refuse to incorporate any of the testimony or evidence into the UK case. As soon as it's settled, then that excuse is gone, and you can reintroduce those witnesses who then tell their story to the panel of judges, who now have to consider
I'm
what
just
this
worried that the
testimony
UC
says,
Global
because
case-
it's already settled in another, because that opens up to fucking years worth of lawsuits
Right.
for them not incorporating that testimony. Whether or not Julian's legal team would do that is an entire different fucking conversation. But
Right.
once it's settled, they have to at least incorporate that evidence into their decision-making process.
I'm just worried that if the UC Global case gets dragged out, which I could see them doing intentionally to, keep that testimony out of this whole thing, and then the appeal, like Rebecca said, they rushed the appeal and it's done by May, and then he's extradited. Then what happens? Then can his lawyers then appeal again? Like what? I don't know. We need a lawyer. I need a lawyer. Somebody. I'm not smart enough for this. There's just so many moving parts, and there's so many different legal systems involved. I mean, you've got the Spanish legal system, and you've got the UK legal system, the US legal system, and it's this mishmash of different standards and regulations, and it's very confusing. And I think it's intentional.
And even beyond that, we now have, right, as of January 1st, 2021, the UK has exited the European Union, and Brexit, for whatever, I don't even know what Brexit looks like, but I believe has come about, which separated Julian from being able to receive specifically EU contracted political asylum within a partner state. Like there was talk about France issuing Julian political asylum for a period of time, but that was only possible in the previous framework under the horrific shit show oil union that's called the European Union. So that's also something that has now completely changed, and the relationship to other international states is, as far as I know, kind of up in the air in regards to how people get asylum and all of that now, because it's not a specific contractual agreement like it used to be, at least with European states.
Well, and remember when, very early on, Assange had said, Julian said, don't sacrifice me on the altar of Brexit. And I honestly, that's always been something that I've been slightly confused about how that will play into it, but it must be to deny this, possibility to go to the European human right, higher court. And I don't know.
Yeah, it effectively closes out it closes England out of having to follow any of the EU laws, any of the EU, any of that shit. Even though I'm a proponent of the idea of sovereign states, so it's conflicting for me. Mm-hmm. It really is. I certainly don't want to inadvertently advocate for something that makes it easier for a tyrannical government to sacrifice a journalist and publisher.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I certainly believe that states should be able to have sovereignty. So it's fucking weird. The nuance, goddamn nuance. Damn you, Large Hadron Collider.
Stupid weasel. Is it a weasel, right? A weasel?
Weasel.
Yeah, weasel.
Weasel. Goddamn weasels.
Well, if you believe the theories, it was actually a disgruntled time traveler that went back and stole all of the Mountain Dew from their vending machines that caused the staffers to become so tired that the system crashed. I don't think it was the weed, but that's the official story.
Oh, okay. Sounds good, man. Mountain Dew will save the world.
Right?
Mountain Dew and weasels.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, what a speech, out in DC by Max and everybody, the journalists that spoke. I mean,
yes.
Andrew, Steve, Misty, all you guys were on fire too. I mean, that was really great to see.
I hate speaking in public. Just want to put that out
I know, but you did a great job.
I hate it so much. Oh.
But we have seen, something from our efforts, which is great. In February, we had a good group of people there, I think, in some of our protests in February too, but definitely the media presence was a lot more, and hopefully that's in time. I'm wondering what you guys think about this invocation or trying to invoke the 25th Amendment on President Trump, and if you think that that's a reason that maybe people were a little bit nervous that he might do something like pardon Assange, or if it's, I just wonder what you guys think about that.
So
I think that this whole 25th thing is going to hurt our chances of him pardoning Assange, because now
100%.
now if he does it, then they can just be like, oh, see, look, he's crazy. Oh my God, he's pardoning Julian Assange. He's crazy. 25th his ass. You know what I mean? Like we talked about, Jesse and I just talked about this with George Somali. I can never say his goddamn name. Yes. And he told us how to say it like 25 times and I still can't do it.
Wolsey.
Yes, but he was excellent. He went through like a very nuanced opinion about all of these things, which is nice. It's nice to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But he was great, and he said that the this whole thing about them threatening the 25th is definitely not helpful to our cause at all. So that's really depressing, because I think was it a long shot that he was ever going to do it? Yes, but there was a shot. There was definitely a shot. So now I think that has just really like stuck a knife in that possibility, as much as I hate to admit it. I'm still going to keep pushing for it, but I don't know that it's very likely at this point.
Well, there was to talk about the larger issue and the larger situation. There was a 300,000-ish person event demanding election integrity, right? Regardless of what you believe of the political spectrum or what have you, there was 300,000 people that turned out saying, I don't want rigged elections anymore. I want to be able to make sure that people's votes count. And during that event, they had signal jammers, right? You couldn't live stream, you couldn't place a phone call, you couldn't send a text message, you couldn't load a web page, right? Specifically, in my opinion, to not allow that event to be broadcast. There was so many people there that were recording, that were getting footage, but it took, 3 hours, 4 hours for one of our friends in the independent media to be able to upload a short clip in the worst video
clip, 3.5 hours.
in the worst
that's like my internet
you can imagine, right? That is a violation of the First Amendment. You cannot roll out signal jammers to prevent people from broadcasting and acting in a journalistic fashion to bring forth factual information about an event.
Bro, so national security, and maybe we could be communicating with each other about how to best get the guy behind the bulletproof glass. That's the excuse that they use.
Right.
But I've never seen them start the fucking jammers that early and over such a broad fucking area.
And the jammers were taking place on the ellipse, so on the national lawn by the Lincoln Memorial to
Washington Monument.
Washington Monument. Sorry, I get those. Washington Monument to basically the back lawn of the White House where these events were taking place. There was not signal jammers in place at the Capitol building. Why are they censoring a 300,000-ish person event demanding election integrity, but didn't deploy the signal jammers when there was a national security issue?
I mean, obviously, I don't know. My thought would be, because what I've been reading from the people who were there and on the ground, and I mean, also, to Steve's point, you do see what's in front of you, but like everybody saw peaceful protesters. That's what I got from most of the people that were there. I mean, so to me, the only thing that I can think of is that just doesn't fit the narrative. You can't declare, people with their own eyes can't see people out there peacefully, I hope not, and then say, oh, those must be domestic terrorists, I mean, which seems the direction. I don't know, it's just weird.
They can't roll out the sweeping legislation on oppressive censorship and surveillance if you aren't scared.
Right.
So they can only show you the scary bits, so that way that you'll cheer the censorship openly and loudly on Twitter.
But really, I mean, but even that, it's like, look at these. I mean, who's scared of these people that were in the Capitol? I don't know.
So can I roll one of the videos from when we were actually there?
Yeah, do it.
Cool. It's going to take me a second and a half here to get it queued up, so I got to download it real quick.
A second and a half?
Second and a half.
That's a very specific measure of time, Andrew.
It is. I'm very good.
We still need to train your raccoons to be our carrier pigeons once they take away our methods of communication.
I have a wonderful update on them, but I'm not going to do that live on air.
Okay, well, we'll talk about it later.
Let me pull this video up because I want to show what this scene was at the Capitol. This was about 40 minutes after the storming and the shooting and all that stuff, right? So let me play this for everybody.
Pardon Julian Assange. Pardon Julian
the little at the end, dude. I can't even keep a straight face like at all.
Julian Assange. Julian Assange. Julian Assange.
It never stops being funny, dude. It never like
Sounds like a little fart or
stop
something.
being fucking funny. I can't. I can't.
Julian Assange. Julian Assange. Julian Assange. Julian Assange.
Fucking idiot cameraman looks like he's about to take a tumble off the Capitol.
Right. So that was, I'm trying to turn off screen share. I think I got it. So that was those were the riots outside the Capitol 40 minutes after it was
It
stormed
looks
into-
very scary.
It was
There's
the
about
most
20 minutes of footage there. Like
Yeah.
overall, there's about 20 minutes of footage. And towards the end of it, you can hear people up at the people who are left up on the Capitol steps. After they recite the Pledge of Allegiance, they begin to chant, "We love people." Not white people or Republican people or patriot people, but people. We love people. And,
Well, okay, wait, can we talk about that for a second? Because there's a lot of fucking generalization going on that all of these people are Nazis. They're all Nazis. No, they're fucking not. Can you stop? Stop with this. Like, apparently now I'm a fascist.
you're a fascist infiltrator, Missy.
I'm a fascist
Right, you're a Nazi
infiltrator.
now.
So obviously I'm just protecting my people, obviously. But it's so fucking infantile. These are not all fascists. They're not all Nazis. They're people who are pissed off because their government stopped representing them. They are angry about it. They should be angry about it. Do I agree with them on everything? Absolutely not. Are some of them absolute shitheels? Absolutely. No question. There are some really terrible people in that crowd, but most of those people are just hardworking people who feel like they have been abandoned by their government and they're pissed off and they wanted to do something about it. That's it. That's it. Like I don't know how people can just lump all this massive group of people into one little bucket and label them as if that's okay. That's not okay. They're not a
every time
monolith.
there's property damage at a BLM protest or another, a left-leaning protest, I guess the intelligentsia runs to social media to trot out the MLK quote that a riot is the language of the unheard. And that's, good enough for that moment. But it doesn't apply to the 99,998 people who were there specifically because they felt they'd been disenfranchised and they had no voice. That doesn't apply there because they have the wrong jersey on.
Right.
Yeah.
But to be fair, both sides do this. I hate to both sides it, but they do. When there's a Black Lives Matter protest, the right is like, oh my God, they're thugs, they're terrorists, they're crazy. And then when this thing happens at the Capitol, all of a sudden the left is like, they're all Nazis. And you guys need to grow the fuck up. Grow the fuck up. Act like an adult, have the ability to look at this in a nuanced way and understand that none of these people are, they're not a monolith. Are there some bad actors at Black Lives Matter protests? Yes, absolutely. There are people that come there with the intention of making the movement look bad, of causing chaos, of infiltrating a movement. And trust me, I know I'm an infiltrator, so I know these things. And then were there bad people at the Capitol? Of course. There are bad people in every group. There are bad people in every group. Assholes.
Andrew's dumbass went and talked to one of them for like 20 minutes too.
Jesus Christ, it's so annoying. It's like these
Thought
people
he
have
made a friend.
10-year-old. Like, grow the fuck up. Grow
Wait a
up.
minute, guys. Like, okay, so I was just thinking of what you said, Missy, and I'm like, well, you could take like the worst person at a Black Lives Matter protest, the worst person at a Trump protest, and they wouldn't be any comparison probably to our CIA or feds. And then it occurred to me, I'm like,
Even
those people probably would be CIA or feds.
Yeah, but that's the enemy. Like these, you keep fighting amongst each other when the enemy are the people in the Capitol building. Like those are the people that we should be angry with. Like those are the people who are screwing us all over. And yes, we disagree on a lot of fucking things. That's okay. I mean, that happens. Human beings have a multitude of thoughts, and all of those things are okay, and we can work through those things at some point. But we have to at some point realize that this isn't about blue versus red or any of those things. We cannot deal with any of the issues we disagree on until we get a functioning fucking government. Let's focus on that for a while, shall we?
Right, with rights, until we all have some rights here. At least we all agree on that. That's a pretty big deal right now.
I think apparently it's not, because the other team, it's so dumb. God, I'm so tired of dealing with these idiots. Sorry.
All the dudes in my chat are fucking expressing their undying love for Kendra right now, and it's pretty freaking hysterical.
Well, Kendra's hot, so I don't blame her.
Careful, or someone's gonna make a video about you, Missy.
Right?
That already happened. I'm okay. See, I guess I broke the deal.
Welcome to the you're the So now you've been, you've had a video made fucking attaching a ridiculous label to you too. We should make sure.
So
we should. I mean, we did make sure. I started at 3 o'clock in the fucking morning again.
Yeah, I seriously love when people call free speech activists fascists.
I have to say though, I admire you guys so much though, because that's a rough spot to be in, where you're like, I mean, I equate it to like a person of color who's even a conservative, that gets like told that they can't, have those beliefs. It's the same thing as like, if you're on the left right now, you say anything about election integrity, which the left has suffered greatly from since 2016. I mean, but I just props to you guys, because, there's a level of like, F them and everything like that, but we're all still human, and that still sucks to deal with. So thank you.
Yeah, it's not fun to be called a fascist publicly. I mean, that's not fun, but it helps that I do not give a fuck what those people think. That helps, like I really just don't care. Those people are not, I really just don't care. So that helps. I mean, it just, it's not fun, because there will be people who believe them. And, now that the seal has been broken, I'm sure there will be more videos to be made about how awful I am. And
I'm incredibly disappointed that Tim Pool chickened out and didn't show up to that thing on the 6th, because I was looking forward to having a conversation with him about the smear video he put out about me. I was disappointed. I think he may have sent an IRL representative. Camera guy, but not for.
Tim Pool should go on Slow News Day and hash this out.
But
that's what he should
come talk to me, Tim Pool.
For any independent journalist that's interested, I've already sent this to some of them. I have a whole folder of videos and pictures describing the events of the day on the 6th, including the 300-ish thousand person election integrity rally that took place, footage from multiple videos from the Capitol while everything was going down. So if anyone's interested in putting just video, like I walked in with a camera and just looked at what was happening, if anyone's interested in putting those videos out there, they do have a little free pardon Julian Assange toot in the background.
There you go, Andrew.
It just makes it all the better, right? Because that was happening and it was wonderful.
Every time I need to laugh, I'm going to watch that.
It's great. I love it. It makes my heart warm. Every time
I need to laugh, I'm going to watch that. And every time I need to feel happy, I'm going to watch the video of Ali reacting to the no extradition.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Do we have that? Can I pull, do you want me to pull that up real quick?
Oh my God, can we please watch that? Oh, I'll cry again. I'll cry again.
Because we have to wrap soon. Nico's waiting to go live, and I don't want to.
No, he figured out that he can stream too.
Okay.
We worked that out. We did. My phone goes nuts every time I fucking go live now.
Good.
Really?
Oh, dude, it's ridiculous. You were sitting next to me Monday morning, and my phone was going fucking ridiculous too. By both of you guys, fuck it. I'm that dude. Like, all right, fine. I'll be that guy. Like, whatever. Fuck, man.
So we got 12 seconds left on this download for the video when no extradition came out.
One thing I was going to say, you guys. Oh, sorry. I was just going to, one thing that does give me so much hope is what Julian Assange always says about censorship, you know,
Yeah.
and it's like a bright spot in my day where it's like, look how weak they are. One,
Look
they
how
have
scared
to
they
care
are.
what people think, you know, and that's one that I hadn't seen recently. And that's so true.
I know.
That's
I think you posted that from the Denver page earlier today, and I saw it, and it gave me like this little you know, like, okay, we can still do this. We can still do this. Like, they're scared.
Right.
We have them scared.
Yes.
I think that's clear. So that is encouraging. We just need to, you know, stop with the team tribal bullshit and, you know, worry about the real issues.
Cool. So I have this. Let me get it pulled up now.
Oh, I'm gonna cry. God damn it.
It's okay. You're allowed to cry.
No, I've already cried enough.
Right? Fuck you, Smith. Grave problems in light of passage of time since alleged offenses. Breitzer, constitutional and procedural protections will be applied to assure it's a fair trial. Breitzer essentially argues the U.S. court is equipped to determine whether the Espionage Act allows for prosecution against Assange, a publisher, for the offenses alleged. She mentions challenges against overbreadth can be made during pretrial. Breitzer does not believe U.S. court would be able or would try to deny Assange rights under the Constitution, really, as he will be put on trial on U.S. soil. Breitzer goes on to add, trust that the U.S. court will properly consider Assange's right to freedom of speech. No, we know that is not correct. Judge accepted doctor's opinions that Assange suffers from recurrent depressive disorder and suffers from autism, though he is highly functioning. Great. There's your favorite fucking phrase, Misty. Breitzer says Assange is at high risk of suicide and that there is a real risk he will be detained subject to special administrative measures in U.S. prison, especially because intelligence community is hostile to him. Breitzer says extradition would be oppressive by reason of Assange's mental health. The United States government's mass incarceration system just lost their case against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange.
So wait, does that mean he's not going to be?
You know, no.
Is he getting off?
No extradition as of this moment.
No extradition! Is it? Sorry.
That's right.
Dude, did the weasel get in the hadron again?
Is that right?
Did it shift us back to the non-dumbest
Is that
timeline?
correct?
I mean, Kevin Costola's got a video feed, so.
And they're saying no.
Kevin
And they're
Costola
saying no. Kevin Costola said no.
in saying she's satisfied procedures described by the U.S. would not prevent Assange from finding a way to commit suicide in U.S. Supermax prison. The judge and defense are discussing an application for bail. U.S.
Judge and
government
defense
is going to
discussing an
immediately
application
appeal.
for bail. US
No,
government will immediately appeal.
no extradition as of this moment.
There's only one motherfucking decision.
We're gonna tear it down. No extradition. Oh my god. Oh my god. No extradition. Oh really? Oh guys.
Kevin even said, holy shit.
You heard it here first. Yeah.
It was fucking hard to watch.
Yeah, it is. I'm already like teary.
Sorry, I'm screaming.
No, scream away, Alice. You've earned the scream.
Disgusting bail. Oh my god. Oh. Right. Oh fuck.
Try to get some secondary on that.
I still love that Sleepy Josh thought we were doing anything.
Oh my God! Thank you.
Hey, do we have any other confirmations of that?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm like,
No, I'm fucking. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go around and get the freedom signs.
Thank you, Ali.
I'll see you later, guys. Love you guys.
Thank you, Ali.
so much.
Please stay in touch today, because your police are still fucking bastards.
Yeah, I've just got to go
Text
get
us to make sure you're safe, please. Thank you.
I've got freedom signs in my car. Just in case. Gotta go get them. Love you guys.
I love that
That was
so
a weird
much.
day.
Oh man, sorry.
I know.
No, fuck you, Smith. Fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you, Smith.
I had
Seriously,
to do it.
though,
That's such
what
a
honestly gets me is Allie. Like that, because nobody worked harder than that crew. And I'm gonna cry talking about it all over again, but nobody worked harder than that crew. Like they're there all the time. And they earned that, you know, like they earned that. And watching her reaction was God damn it, Andrew.
And they can, a lot of things can happen to all of us, but you know what? They can't take that, that goodness away. You know what I mean?
I still can't believe that we broke the fucking no extradition ruling to the crowd outside of the fucking courtroom.
That's the cool. I mean, seriously, Steve, I know it's going to make you cry, but how, that has to feel pretty amazing to be the person telling Allie.
Oh my God, dude.
I couldn't even process it. I had to go and start pulling up other feeds. I was like, Taylor.
Yeah, no, Andrew was off on a fucking island. We're having a cuddle puddle. It was,
and Andrew's
grab a cup without looking up.
He even took somebody's drink. He's staring at his computer and he's like, you look.
I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. That's how that ended. Not ended.
It was such a weird, strange shift of emotion because I mean, if you guys watch me, I was ready to fight. I was pissed. I don't know if I've been that thoroughly pissed off before because everything was awful. All of the things that she was saying, it was horrible. And I was ready to just go punch Andrew in the face just to get some of that anger out or something. Or Kendra, she was sitting beside me, just punch her in the face. I was pissed off. And then it's shitty tweet. And then a kind of okay tweet where it's
confusing.
What? Yes, it was so fast because it went from shitty tweet to okay, here's a weird kind of middle of the road tweet, and then it was no extradition, and it was wait, what just happened? What just happened? And then
literally Mary Kostakidis's tweets were talking about the judge saying that Julian would have proper rights in the U.S. and then talking about U.S. prison condition, and she literally types wait, what?
Yeah. ...
No extradition.
Yeah.
Holy shit! In 8 different tweets, and I'm
it was the weirdest shift of environment I've ever. I mean, I went from being, and it's so funny because I don't remember. It may have been Glory. I don't remember who it was, but somebody was on Twitter was oh my gosh, this is awful. I'm already crying, and I'm we're live. I don't want to cry on camera, so I'm just gonna sit here in my madness. Steve kept saying, you should talk. And I'm no, because I'm mad, and when I get mad, I cry. And so I'm I don't want to talk because then I'll get mad and then I'll cry, and I don't want to cry on camera. And then there's this no extradition ruling, and all of a sudden I am a sobbing puddle of mush.
I know how that went.
So we as a group in DC were not prepared.
No.
For good news at all. Period. At all. We had to dig into emergency funds and personal money to go and get cakes and party decorations and balloons and a helium tank. We literally were we were prepared for battle. We weren't prepared for a party.
No, we were not. And it was, I mean, that's a good thing to, I'm okay with that. But that was definitely an interesting turn of events that in no way expecting. You guys know me, I'm very cynical, and I expected the absolute worst. And then when they started reading the whole thing and it was just absolute shite, I was ready for, seriously, I was ready to go fight people.
There was literally a point where me and Ali were like going back and forth, like, this is the covenant of the New World Order. Like, they're literally taking global press freedom and giving U.S. international jurisdiction, which they still are. They haven't gone away. They still are.
One of the best things about that video too is Allie's facial expression changes. Like, that's why I went back and got those screenshots, because she went from being like pissed off like me, like when they said, you know, they'll protect his free speech, and she's like rolls her eyes, and then when there's like this succession of like absolute confusion, and then just like bewilderment, and then just pure unadulterated joy. I mean, that is joy on that woman's face, and it was so much fun to watch her reaction. I have watched that video more times than I care to admit. I'm not gonna lie.
You're so right, Missy, though. It's wonderful. You can't watch it enough.
It is. And we needed that. Like, we needed that so bad. Like, the past couple of years have been really hard,
Just
you know?
Throat punch after throat punch after throat punch after throat punch. And,
we had such an intense escalation in the UK of police violence against protesters. They had literally gone to Piccadilly Circle for time immemorial protesting this. Everyone in the city knew, every police officer and every cop knew who was going to be there and what they were doing and what they were standing for. And it turned into a shit show where they were sending more police than protesters. The UK team with Emmy and Ali and so many other people have done such a great job for so long that, like, yes, we have done a show, but the victory is with them and Alex Hills and Susie Dawson and the people that have just been going for a decade fighting for this.
Yes.
So we were lucky enough to be the ones that had a camera pointed at us reading the tweets, but this is a global victory, but it is not the end of the fight. Like, we've defined this as essentially securing the beach at Normandy against the Nazi invasion, to where we haven't won. The battle's not over. The war has
Don't you fight my people.
But we have a beachhead. We have a front to continue resisting global tyranny. And if everyone remembers their cypherpunks, right, we have successfully pushed back against the coming dystopia. We have not secured self-determination in the area of free speech, right? But we have pushed back long enough to continue fighting. So I just want to say to everyone in the audience, to all of the organizers around the world, fucking thank you. Like, thank you for putting your lives into this, because it has made a difference. And it may not seem like it now, but 20 years from now, when your children have the right to read classified information that's hiding government crimes, that is a game changer. And we are so close to securing that as a legal precedent at this point, because now all we have to do is get the charges dropped and get either immunity or a preemptive pardon for Julian for all information ever published at this point, basically.
And I know it can feel like, you know, at least for me, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it feels like, you know, well, I'm just like this one tiny little person, and this is such a massive undertaking, and I don't know, like, what difference can I make? Like, I go through that all the time, where it's like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. I'm not making a difference. It's so hard. Like, what do I do? What can I do more? And I think when you have one of those little victories, it makes you realize that it's not just you, this one little person. You're part of like this greater thing, and it may feel like you're on your own sometimes, but you are absolutely not on your own. There are people all around the world fighting this fight, and it can seem really daunting, and it can seem impossible and really frustrating. Like, I mean, when I spoke at the DOJ, I said that, and some people who follow me on Twitter may know that, like, the couple weeks leading up to that, I was having a really hard time. Like, things just felt really dark. And I felt really heavy from, you know, the idea that the extradition ruling was coming, and, you know, being a cynic, I didn't have very positive thoughts about how it was going to turn out. And so I was in a really dark spot. Like, I really just, it was hard for me to like keep it going. And, you know, when I got to DC and I see all these people and I see all these journalists, you know, showing up to speak out, and then we get this little tiny win. I mean, that's like the kind of, that I needed that. Like I needed that. And so don't think that what you're doing isn't important. Like it is important. It does make a difference. Even if you are just like the one person on a street corner with a sign, that matters. And it's, you know, part of like the bigger picture. And so it's not just you on the street corner with that sounds so bad. You on a street corner. It's not what I mean.
Put your ass out on that corner. Freedom.
But seriously, it's not just you with your sign. Like it's you with your sign and the thousands upon thousands of people around the globe who are putting in the sweat equity and the tears and the effort to get this done. So, I mean, take those people with you when you go and you do this work. Like go carry those people on your back with you. You know what I mean? They're there. Yeah. They are there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I got. Oh.
Bro,
no, that's very well put and so true. You know,
I mean, I was trying not to put too much of it out onto Twitter because I don't like to discourage people, and I feel like and especially because for whatever reason, mostly just because I'm an unbelievably compulsive tweeter, people associate me with like Assange Twitter, and so I feel like if I'm negative, then that can leak out onto other people. And so I try not to do too much of that because I don't want to discourage people, but I also want to keep it real. I mean, I want people to know that this is hard. Like it is hard, but it's worth it. So yeah, I was not in a good spot the 2 weeks leading up to that at all. It was really tough. I mean,
I don't think any of us were in a good spot leading up to it. Even the day before at our event on Sunday, like I literally said, like, no matter what happens, no matter what this ruling is, don't stop fighting. Like we don't expect it to go well tomorrow. We don't expect the U.S. government to be stopped in its tracks. And in some ways they were, in some ways they weren't. But what happened was something that no one anticipated. Like I think we actually had, I think it was Sean O'Brien who said you couldn't even get betting odds in Vegas that Julian wouldn't be extradited because of the information and situation against him was so great. So we as a global free Assange community have done the impossible. And now it's time to continue doing that because this fight's not over. And if anything, we just got a breath of fresh air and a second wind under our wings.
Yes, it really was like a boost. Like it was a much needed one. Like that gave me like a whole other like conviction. Like, okay, we can do this. You know what I mean? Like that hope of we can do this. We're doing it. Like we're doing it right now. I mean,
we just need the rest of you to fucking get on board with us. Like I know the people that we're talking to directly right now and the people that are in the chats and shit are.
Yeah.
But this isn't any way, shape, or form over. And in fact, because we got a little victory, I expect attacks on press freedom to escalate. I expect censorship to escalate, and it has already. Like immediately, it has. I expect this narrative of sectarian violence in the states to I don't know, confuse the fuck out of everyone, and that's why it's so important. Because and look, man, you don't have to have me or Andrew. There's a lot of content creators and journalists that watch this show, whether or not they admit it. You know, some do openly, and bless you.
Hi.
But you need to, if you're a journalist, if you're a content creator, you need to have the people who are on the ground on Wednesday at the Capitol on your show, because there are so many horribly bad narratives about what went down immediately after that. And guys, we went to go cover that from, you know, a respectful distance, right? Let's just all assume that happened. And yeah, dude, I mean, it really, like, what's coming out in terms of media narratives around the Capitol, what are they calling it, dude? An insurrection? Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking lick balls, you fucking idiots. Like you need to have somebody on your show who can add a little bit of fucking perspective and maybe not, stoke actual sectarian violence in the United States surrounding a completely fraudulent election. Let's not go the color revolution route. Let's maybe try and talk this out like fucking grown-ups.
Yeah, you guys saw that article by Tedros, right? I mean, that was really, I thought.
Yeah, I can't. He's going to come on, I think tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to get Burmis on,
Nice.
and we're going to have another round of unpacking what happened, because we had Pasta and Fee on last night. And I'm trying to reach out to everybody who was on the ground there.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to take all of us explaining what we saw from the positions that we were at in order to get a complete analysis of what went down. Although everybody that I've talked to that was there was like, this was a fucking psyop, like in real time, never been on the ground before, at ground zero for a real life psyop, fucking and until we really address this entire week, because it was fucking nuts, dude. Yes, Josh, 7 minutes. I understand. We went from a wall of police, around 40 people who were there for the Force the Vote on Sunday, to police melting away entirely. Under a stand down order.
Opening the gates.
Making a video.
Opening the gates. Taking selfies with protesters.
Shooting them.
Yeah.
I have
hold up, Smith. I'm not
sorry.
done. No, fucking go ahead.
I have a slightly different interpretation, just based on perspectives from being out there on December 13th. 12th and 13th for the Stop the Steal events that happened in 2020. The police, through the protests that were happening with BLM and all of them, have been trained to stand down at the order of protesters. I have video that I can pull up that shows it. I'm sure we'll go through that eventually. I've sent it to some people to try to get it put into their films and pieces, and as a matter of talking. But the police in DC are literally trained at the word of protesters to back down, right? So I'm not surprised that the gates were open, but I do not think it was, and this is personal opinion, I'm sure there's plenty of conjecture, there's videos that show the gates being opened, but I do not think it was a pre-coordinated event to have a specific police officer there to open the gate. The DC police, again, have been trained to allow protesters to go into places they are not supposed to, because of the order of those protesters, literally telling them to back down. I think it's good that police don't try to just force protesters out of the fucking way, right? And say, no, you can't be here. I'm going to tear gas the fuck out of you. But at the same time, there is ways the police interact that facilitate this, even outside of the belief that someone had to be there specifically to open the gate. So I just want to put that into the ether, because that's something I've personally witnessed.
But the narrative is that nobody did, right? The narrative is that it was broken into and that it was a insurrection.
Right.
So I mean, that doesn't, that doesn't go in line with what he did.
Like and what happened?
Created a coup against the government he was in charge of.
So
wrap your fucking head around that for a second.
So let me try to find this, because there is a video that Luke Radowski put out from We Are Change that shows the mentality and the change in what happened on the ground.
We've got 5 minutes, Andrew, so save it for Tuesday.
Okay, I'll save it for Tuesday. Come back Tuesday and we'll give you a full report of veterans getting tear gassed by police officers and saying we're no longer on your side.
And what's your name and where can people find you?
My name's Andrew Smith, action_for Assange, actionforassange.com for a bunch of call to actions. I'm going to be putting out new calls to actions. If you're interested in organizing behind the scenes with me, please reach out. I have a really cool project that I'm working on that I need some help with. I have most of it done. I just need little here's and there's from people. So action, FOR Assange at protonmail.com if you're interested in shooting me an email to get involved in some behind the scenes work.
Oh, okay. And I'm Kendrick Christian. You can follow our group Denver Free Assange at DNV3JA. I'm also on Twitter, but not so much on my personal account at edevs13. Thanks everyone in the chat. Your support is huge. Us going to DC it was really great. Every time we've been out there, we're just growing and growing, and that we could never do that without you. So thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. Thank you, Josh, Kimber, all the rest of the, Action for Assange crew that's not on the vigil, which is quite a few people all working together. That's awesome. Thank you. And thanks to my co-hosts.
And I'm Misty Winston. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. I also have another show called Facts on the Ground with my friend Jesse. We just released 2 amazing interviews this week. Actually 3, because Jesse also interviewed Mohammed Almazi about the bail denial. I was unable to participate in that interview because I had a meeting with my kid's teacher. So it's just Jesse on that one. But yeah, I just want to thank obviously everybody who helped pitch in to get us to DC. You guys are truly amazing human beings, and we love you. And then I also just once again want to give a big shout out to the London crew. You're my favorite people in the whole world. You guys worked so hard, and I'm proud to be on the same team as you. So yeah, before I start crying again, take it over, Steve.
I'm Steve Foykin, and I have a show called Slow News Day with the internet's best co-host, Glory Jones. Not that my co-hosts here aren't also the best co-hosts. You're all the best. I'm fucking ridiculously lucky. You guys have no idea. You should be watching us on Rockfin, because there's no legitimate reason for us to have a YouTube channel anymore. We do not comply. Like, as a starting off point, so that's where we'll be when YouTube arbitrarily removes our channel. Rockfin, you can make a free account there, or you can endorse Slow News Day for $10 a month and get access to the premium content of everyone else. We do have that GoFundMe, the DC GoFundMe, still up, because out of pocket I spent too much money keeping us there and housed and fed and shit. So that's still up. You're welcome to donate to it or not. I got a job.
I'll probably be cutting it off after.
Leave it up for 6 months, Smith. We got more shit to do.
That's fair. Well, we'll make another one. We'll have more stuff happening.
I'm feeling barky, I guess. I don't know. I want to thank everyone who helped get us to DC, man. You guys just you consistently fucking blow my mind. You do. You're incredible. We love you very, very much. Thanks again. Tomorrow on Slow News Day at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, we'll be joined by Commander X for, in his opinion, his final interview ever, as he is in failing health. Gonna be heavy, gonna be emotional, and X has some shit that he would like to tell the world. So make sure you're there for that, because it's gonna be a brain breaker. Gonna try and get Tedros Fikramariam on tomorrow afternoon with Jason Burmis, so we can have another unpacking of what happened in DC. Thursday, MMA legend John Fitch will be on with us. The following Sunday, Richard Gage from Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth joins us to talk about the documentary film 7, which you all should be watching. And yeah, we got really good things going on over on Slow News Day, so make sure that you're a part of that. And once again, man, I love the fucking shit out of you guys. You guys are great. Thanks, Sleepy Josh, always on the 1s and 2s, and good luck to us all.